Welcome to episode 48 of the Necronama.com. I am James Sabata, horror author, screenwriter, co-host of the podcast you're listening to right now, and you're not wearing any pants.
And I am Don Guillory, author, historian, educator, co-host of this podcast. And there have been moments where I felt like I was part of some weird experiment to test my mettle.
So joining us today is comedian Brent Terhune. Brent, welcome to the show, man.
Hey guys, I'm so glad you read from a certain book and released me from my cage for this podcast episode.
We are raising you from the depths and bringing you out. How exciting. Hey, why don't you tell our listeners about yourself and what you do?
I guess primarily I'm a stand-up comedian, but thanks to quarantine, this will make the episode no longer evergreen, but right now it's quarantine, so I've been forced to stay at home, and I make satirical videos and just try to make funny videos and stuff like that. So my website's brentcomedy.com if you ever want to know too much about me. And I have an album coming out later this year, stand-up comedy album called Bluff Creek.
Nice. One of your videos I watched was all about horror films, and I didn't even know this was on there. I just happened to come across it while I was watching other ones, and I was like, this is perfect. So I'm actually going to put it up on our social media stuff so that everybody checks it out. But you seem like a big wrestling fan, and so that totally struck a chord with me because I'm a giant wrestling fan. And your video of, I think it's called like Every Wrestling Fan Ever or something to that degree. Hilarious. Killed me.
That's awesome. Yeah, I like horror and wrestling and pretty much everything that's not real and is awkward to talk about in public with real people.
Well, then you're going to love it here. So,
Real to me, damn it.
That's right. I'm going to start saying that about horror. Horror is still real to me, damn it. So you picked Cabin in the Woods. I'm super excited about this. This is one of my favorite films of all time. I remember when it was coming out and I saw the trailers and I was kind of like, looks like a normal slasher, only maybe a little better. And then, the more I thought about it, I'm like, there's no way that Joss Whedon did a normal fucking slasher. And then what we got was so much better than any hope that I had going into this film. And this has just been like in my top 5 ever since. Is this one of your favorite movies, or did you just pick it because you knew we were talking social commentary, or why did you pick this film?
It's in my top 10, definitely. And we were talking off mic, but it's one of those where, when people ask about horror, it's like when you talk about stand-up comedy and people are always like, oh, who are your favorites? You're always going to hear George Carlin and Richard Pryor. That's Halloween and Friday and Elm Street. So I wanted to do one that not many people bring up, I think. So, I picked a bunch of other ones, but we went with Cabin in the Woods, and you mentioned watching the trailer. I didn't watch the trailer till like 40 minutes ago because I went and I like to go into movies blind. And had I seen the trailer before the movie, I don't think I would have liked it as much. But that's in hindsight when I know when they show the control room and stuff what's about to happen,
Yeah.
But yeah, just this movie is it's like 3 movies in one, and it's a total twist in the movie. It's a slasher, but then you get these other elements. And they even in I watched the director's commentary with this, and they were talking about the 2 different movies, like upstairs and downstairs. Upstairs is the cabin part, and then downstairs is a control room, and it's really interesting to look at it that way.
Yeah, definitely. What about you, Don? Is this in your top movies ever, or?
I'm going to stretch it out to say top 20, only because this goes into different genres of horror films, and I hate I hate choosing them. It's like choosing my children. Thankfully, I only have one, so I don't have to make that much of a choice.
I was gonna say.
But with this movie, I like it because, like Red was saying, for me, I like to go in blind to a lot of movies. I might catch the preview, I might catch the trailer, but I want to see as little as possible. Unlike you, James, you love your spoilers. For me, I'm like, I want to be hit in the face with those surprises. And there were plenty of surprises, twists, funny ones, dark ones in this one that, for me, all work. And the thing that I would have definitely loved to have seen, and we were talking about this earlier, is since this is one of those things, at least the film is kind of like the Belko experiment, where it's taking place in other places. I want to get more of a glimpse into what is taking place with those other parts of the world where they're having to deal with these mythical creatures or monsters, and what exactly is what goes into the lore there. But this is definitely top 20 for me, and that's not saying anything bad about the film. It's just one of those things that I have a really hard time choosing as far as narrowing things down to top 10. So I think if it came down to the decision that has to be made in this film, I might have been like Marty. I'm like, shit, I don't know if I could do this.
All right, so Brent, back to what you were saying about upstairs, downstairs. Do you want to flesh that out a little for our listeners who may not be aware of this concept?
Yeah, actually, before we do that, so we only met. Do you guys want to give me your top 3 horror movies? I'm just curious.
Ooh.
Just so I can, because you said top 20. It's just interesting. So to see what and I'll give you my top 3.
My list is changing. I mean, it's one of those malleable lists. But Night of the Living Dead, the original.
Mm-hmm.
Get Out, because again, you're mixing so many different things in there. There's so many hidden. You watch it, every time you watch it, there's something that you missed and something new that you find out. And then the third one, shit. See, now this is when it's going to get hard. You can go ahead.
Oh man,
James, I'll figure out my third one.
So, honestly, I feel like mine changes constantly based on my mood or where I'm at in life, basically. So I'm going to go with right now my top 3. And right now, I would say my number 1 would be Parasite. I can't stop watching it. I've seen it 7 times.
Okay.
And that's really, really unusual for me. Except for my second choice, which I'm going to get to in a second, which is the only other thing that I've watched repeatedly a lot. So for me to actually sit and watch something that many times, I'm thinking that must be my favorite. I keep going back to it. My second would be the Saw franchise. And I have a couple caveats in there. I don't believe that Saw 7 exists, for instance. but I'm a diehard Saw fanatic. And I mean, I forgive the ridiculousness of everything. I was that guy that every Halloween I was on the phone with my cousin before it would come out, and we're talking theories of what's going to drop in number 5 or where this is going. And it was the experience of that every year thing, right? And so Saw has been my go-to forever. I've seen every Saw probably 20 times, except 7 because it doesn't exist. And then and I refuse to call it Saw 3D, so fuck anybody that calls it that. All right, so then my third one I would go for is relatively also new, like Parasite. It's Ready or Not. Ready or Not is the most fun I've had in a theater in 10 years. I saw this movie twice in the theater, and then when I went to visit my sons, they live quite a ways away from me. When I went to visit them, they're all teenagers. I made them go see Ready or Not. So I saw it 3 times in the theater. So I got to throw that in as my number 3.
Okay. That's a testament to how much, if you see it in the theaters, that's like a testament to how good or how much you love a movie, you know?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, my third, I don't know how I forgot this, Train to Busan.
Oh, nice.
And the thing is, we just talked about this a few episodes ago, and I can't believe that, it slipped my mind. I'm like, that would easily be up there, but there might be some changing and reshuffling depending on kind of like what you pointed out, James. Sometimes mood dictates it, but 1968, Night of the Living Dead is always going to be at the top of that list for me.
Nice. What about you, Brent?
I feel the same way. I mean, one of my top three probably is not going to change since I was a kid, but we'll see. But it's also interesting to look back, and especially like Night of the Living Dead with the social commentary, how you change over the decades versus, how you would look at that a little differently. Especially Saw, that was like, I hate to use the phrase torture porn because it's thrown around a lot, but it was like definitely a decade-defining genre type horror film,
Definitely, yeah.
But my favorite would be Halloween, and that's that's a George Carlin, Richard Pryor answer. That's a gimme, I know. So I'm willing to admit that, but just that movie in general, just from being a kid and seeing it, and then right after that would probably be It Follows, which is kind of a similar Halloween type movie, and both those really have a big part of it is the score, which I really enjoy. And then after that, it's maybe a toss up, but I don't know. I think the movie Creep, if you guys have seen that one.
Oh,
nice.
Yes.
That's a great choice.
And I think all three of those have in common is they were low budget for their time, especially Creep with two characters, a found footage movie. I like that movie, but then I really, from a guy who wants to make a horror movie or anything, being a creator, you just look at, they made a whole feature movie with two characters and a camera. And that's a thing where it's like, if you're trying to be a creator, you look around in the room and you're like, what do I have at my disposal so I could create? As opposed to writing a movie where you're like, all right, we're going to have a car crash. But then it's also like, how do you crash a car just being a guy,
Yep.
So that's why I really like that movie, is it's kind of the simplicity of it.
That's a great choice.
But I can answer your upstairs, downstairs question. I just was curious about your favorites.
No, take us wherever you want to go, man. You're the guest.
That's right. And the guest is always right here on this podcast.
I would argue, but what's the point? No, go ahead.
And I'll have you know I'm not wearing shoes and a shirt, so
sweet.
You can't make me. But I guess the top and bottom thing, and then it also breaks down into, there are three parts to this movie. The beginning part is just the average horror movie, where you go from that first scene where they're in that the office building with the two controller guys, but then as soon as that scene ends, it almost seems like a Scream movie to me, where they're teenagers, and Chris Hemsworth's first scene is him walking in, maybe in a Letterman jacket and a football, and you're like, as soon as you see him, what kind of character he is.
Right.
So there's that first half where they're just kind of setting up, maybe that could be another Scream film, is with those characters, and then you get the flip at the gas station, where now it's a horror movie kind of reality show type thing, and then at the end you get, I don't even know what you would call it, but kind of a 13 Ghosts release, and then you get some kind of like mythology added to that, so it's like three different movies in one. And with that, you get up top, you get just the horror movie happening, and then down below you get the guys creating that horror movie, which is really interesting because they're kind of pushing the buttons, and it was almost like a choose your own adventure for a horror movie. And I think it was you, Donald, that said like you would like to go around the world and see the rest of these horror movies play out.
Oh, definitely. And even when they had all the pieces that would summon whatever animal, monster, person, ghost, whatever it was, whatever the monster was supposed to be. I'm sitting there thinking, like, how pissed off Hadley, how pissed off he was, because, like, never going to get to see a merman. Like, he's just hoping beyond hope that the one thing he wants to see in all the years they've been doing this is a fucking merman. And And then people are arguing about, oh, well, I picked zombies. Those are technically zombies. And they're like, no, these are specifically these ones. They don't fit it. And so you just think about all the politics in that room when people are arguing about the monsters, having those monsters, cheering these monsters on. And then kind of what you see in nerd culture, pop culture fandoms of what exactly qualifies as a monster or a vampire or a dragon or all this other shit, and how we kind of just get caught up in that instead of enjoying, which would have been a weird thing for them to enjoy, but get caught up in enjoying these monsters going after these young kids.
I gotta know really fast, Brent, did he pay you to set him up for that 13 Ghosts conversation he wants to have? Because I'm sitting here like I'm being trolled right now.
I know he'd have to pay me to watch that movie. No, I actually do like that movie, but when I was watching it, I was like, oh, it's just one of those where there's so many monsters, that that's what comes to mind.
Awesome.
And it was kind of one of those. It's kind of like a fantasy draft of horror movies.
Yeah. Well, and even that part, I was confused when I was first watching it, because I'm sitting there, my wife was watching with me today, and I'm like, the way they set it up, it's almost as if they're trying to make a horror movie, basically a snuff film, but pass it off as a horror movie. Like, oh, we've got all these people watching. I'm thinking like, well, is this like Truman Show? Is this like, what's going on here to where you're now going to make these kills very brutal, very violent. There are people that are eating this up at home, watching this on TV or whatever the fuck is going on. And they're thinking, oh, well, this is probably just a movie, or this is, something to consume for entertainment.
Yeah, it's really interesting, because then I'm also wondering, which I don't think they answer in the movie, is this a yearly thing? How often does this sacrifice have to be made? Because clearly enough for people to be employed by it,
right,
as a job. Are there, like, when there are people, those monsters in like their glass walled cells, is there like a zookeeper that has to go around and feed the buzzsaw head guy or the merman? That, like,
they have their own Joe Exotic there.
I think one of the creatures was just actually a big, like, Egyptian cat that I read, so that could happen. What am I saying? It could happen. There's a werewolf in the movie. Yeah, of course it could happen.
Right?
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
I would assume that like if you got fired from this place, you're gonna go viral talking about it, right? So I would assume that that's how they feed these monsters.
You're not making it out there. But both of you missed the obvious question. Brent was talking about questions that weren't answered, but there's a question that wasn't answered, and he just brought up, referenced it. We don't know if Wolfman has nards in this one.
Good Lord. But yeah, now I was also wondering how often this happens, and not just because of this one place where everybody's doing this, but because they do it in all these other places. And I'm just like does Japan have a big monster facility like this too? Like each one of these, like that's a lot of people employed. That's a lot of money going into all this. And I get that it keeps the world going. That's a good thing. But holy shit. I want to know more about that aspect. I want to know how often it happens. I want to know how did they tell other countries? Like, hey, you got to do this too in case we fail. They couldn't have failed to figure that out. I have a lot of questions.
Yeah, it's interesting because there's that scene in the Japanese classroom, and what is, I don't know, a Japanese banshee? I don't know what that was. And I actually pulled up the list of creatures, and I don't see. There's a witch and sexy witch on the list, which is crazy. But it's also like, do they even have their own set of creatures in Japan versus Germany and stuff? Or like in one of the quick screenshots or whatever on the TV was like a huge monster. So does nobody know about this, or how are they showing this to people? You know what I'm saying? Like you said, the Truman Show, or is it just for the quote unquote gods?
It's very strange. I don't know.
I found her name. Her name is Kiko. She's known as the Japanese floaty girl. So I don't know if she happens to be a banshee or she just happens to be an entrapped soul or what's going on. But she didn't come out of TV. So
is floaty girl a technical term?
I'm looking on the wiki for it for this film, and that's the term that they gave her was Japanese floaty girl.
I just pulled it up. You're right. You're yeah, the floaty girl. Sure.
Hey, Don, can you just run to Google and type in Japanese floaty girl and tell us what happens?
No.
I can't do that on... Okay. Well, I mean, it was worth a shot.
No. No.
I would have liked to see more of these, though. I would like to see, like, the German one or the whatever else, you know? I'd like to know who's
I'm sure there was
to partake.
The Yeti involved.
That was on the list of stuff. Was one of the categories was Sasquatch, Yeti, or I think it was Indigo. Maybe it was the other creature.
Yeah.
They've got Snowman. They've got the Scarecrow folk. The Dismemberment Goblins. That's very specific.
Right. As opposed to the other goblins.
Yeah. Then it's also weird about these creatures. Then you have like the doctors or those people with like the Japanese mask on, where it's like those are just humans, I thought, or the clown, you know?
Yeah.
Right.
Well, even the KKK, like they're in there, and I'm like, were these humans that are like actual KKK members, or is this like supernatural KKK? I don't know. But my real question is, who the fuck is Kevin? I need to know about Kevin. Kevin's on the betting board, and I want to know everything about Kevin.
I think
Kevin's probably one of the interns.
I think in my research it was a reference to Sin City, which I don't even remember that movie if I've seen it or not. But I think that was a reference to it. But also, just if you don't know that movie, just to see Kevin on there is just funny. And this is also a really funny horror movie.
Yeah, definitely. We talk a lot about how horror and comedy go together. And as a comedian, you're well aware of that, I'm sure, you know, the whole build up and then the twist payoff, the subversion of expectations. Either you're trying to make people laugh or you're trying to make them scream or both. And this movie does it on an amazing level.
Yeah, it's really one of those where I don't think this movie is the scariest thing I've ever seen, but some of the characters, especially like the daddy zombie, whatever his name was, the big tall one that comes to the door, just seeing that, if I saw that guy, I mean, that dude's scary. So I don't think the scares in here are really crazy, but I think it definitely helps. And you guys would know that, to lighten the mood, you can get some laughs in there. And then I think that really pays off when you do have a real scare, because it's such a 180.
Totally.
Well, out of these, you talk about fearing them. Which one of these do you think? Because you're dealing with mythical creatures, you're dealing with monsters, ghosts, poltergeist, paranormal stuff. Which of these do you think is probably? Which all of them are capable of killing you. That's kind of settled. But which of these do you think is probably the scariest, in your opinion, or the one that you'd be most fearful of? And which one do you think would you be at least threatened by?
I mean, for me, the obvious one, when you see the elevators open up and there's that giant snake who's really fast. And I think I have a Michael Myers, not even nightmare, just a dream about once a month. But I also have snake dreams, and those are nightmares. But I don't like snakes. But to me, there's something less scary about a big snake. But it's also just a big, giant snake that can kill you. And it has no tact. Like maybe those zombies could wait behind a door to get you. But there's nothing like that with the giant snake. And as far as something that was not scary, I don't know. I'd have to look over this list. I mean, maybe even the merman, just because it's or the unicorn, until you find out that it's a murdering unicorn.
Oh, I want to go next because I'm going to actually reverse what he just said. The merman is fucking terrifying to me. I do not like anything in water to begin with. Like if I can't see the bottom of water, I don't want anything to do with it. And so Like the Little Mermaids in Harry Potter were like the creepiest fucking creatures in the entire world to me. And so it became this thing where my wife makes fun of me for being scared of mermaids because she knows that those are what I mean. But when she tells people, she wants them to think of like Ariel, you know? So Merman, 100% terrifying to me. And then this fucking thing is shooting blood out of its blowhole. Fuck that. I want nothing to do with this guy.
It's almost like it was a nautical juicer.
Yeah, it was crazy. I do love, that is one of my favorite lines, though, when Hadley's laying there and he's like, oh, come on.
Like, he's been waiting years to see a merman.
and he got to see one.
That's what he gets.
But no, I'm going with the giant snake as my not scary. And my reason is exactly what you said. I think there's something about it being big that's less terrifying. Also, I feel like this thing is going to eat me whole. Right? Like, I don't feel like I'm going to suffer with it. I don't feel like it's going to rip me limb from limb. It's not going to chew on my neck and, be painful. I think I'm just fucking done as soon as this thing gets me. So it's way less terrifying to me. Don, you're up.
Ooh. See, I'm torn between the unicorn because I wouldn't. I'd be drawn in by the unicorn because I wouldn't think it was a threat. So I'd probably be least fearful of that. Holy shit! The other one is probably the clan. I wouldn't be afraid of in this situation.
That's a scary situation when the clan is the least scary thing.
Right. It's like out of these, like I would probably say the clan or maybe the clown under normal circumstances. Like, it's fucking weird. I don't know. I'm kind of like you, Brent. I don't like snakes. I'm not a fan of reptiles. So I don't know. Maybe the blob, because it dissolves you. At least with the snake, there's a chance that you can get away. If the blob gets you, at least from general understanding of blobs themselves, they absorb and dissolve you. So I think that a death from one of them would be the worst. Unicorn stabs me, I might survive. I might be able to ride him, ride off into the sunset on his back, but I'm gonna go probably the blob.
For all you know, the unicorn horn might have healing properties in it.
True.
Which true. Seems counterintuitive, but
that's what the unicorn was doing. Come here, let me save you.
Let me heal you. I did in I think it was a commentary or something, or like the behind the scenes making of. Joss Whedon was talking about pretty much the whole movie was easy to shoot until they got to this part where the monsters are released, and he said specifically in the script, I think the script said, and there was chaos on every screen, and he really realized, like, he regretted putting that in the script because now you went from like maybe 4 zombies to now a merman and some clowns and all these different creatures which are super hard to shoot.
I was thinking about that when I was watching it. I was just like, holy shit, they had to film stuff for every single screen that's showing anything. That just like blew my mind when I was watching it today. But, you guys were talking about the KKK a little bit ago and how they're the least scary thing in this. That's hilarious in itself. But I'm just like, when were they going to be used? Like, we never send a stereotypical group of these kids out and they're all black. I don't know. It seems like a strange thing to have there.
Look, even I'm sorry, not Dana, Holden, the Jesse Williams character. Even that moment where he sees that painting and he's like, yeah, that's fucked up. I'm taking this one down because I can't look at this shit. Or he had other moments like, something's a little weird. He has that typical or the stereotypical black guy in the horror film where he's like, something's not right here, but I don't want to say anything. It would have been a whole lot easier to dispatch of the clan than what they call them, the zombie redneck family.
I can't find a zombie redneck torture family.
Yes.
That's such a great description. I love that it's written out that way. They don't write the Buckners. That'd be too easy.
Yeah.
Yeah, because
Kevin.
then we'd be like, who are the Buckners? Oh, zombie redneck torture family. That's their Twitter bio is Eli Buckner, brother of the zombie redneck torture family. I think this movie also did a good job of, you set up the tropes of you have the blonde girl and the jock and the stoner, and really, I think they also said in the movie is we are not who we are, because they're getting pumped with chemicals and the hair dye that changes whatever girl's name so she's more ditzy or whatever. And it's just a fun trope that they kind of turned on their heads, because now it's like the gods at the end of the movie are us watching the movie, essentially, because we crave a sacrifice every horror movie we're watching.
Yep. Yeah, that's one of my favorite theories about this film, that we're the gods, and that if we don't like the sacrifice, everybody loses their livelihood. So in essence, they lose their lives. I think that's such a great, whether Whedon meant it that way or not, it's a great fucking symbolic theory.
I feel like we're reading far too into this movie as far as watching him talk about the making of, because he like pointed to that painting that was on the wall doing like a tour of the cabin, and he was like, we have several theories about what this painting is, but we don't talk about it, in a joking manner. And I realized I read more into that painting than he ever thought to. Maybe he did, but this is one of those movies where I wouldn't have been upset that there was a sequel or a prequel or some other type of lore added to it.
Yeah, because it leaves you asking you, like, there's more that you want to know, and James and I talked about this, and this is probably why he thinks that I paid you for the 13 Ghosts reference, because that was my complaint with 13 Ghosts. If you had the DVD, you got the backstories, like the full backstories on each one of the ghosts, and it would have been a whole lot cooler if they had spent 10 minutes, if that, 5-10 minutes, just talking about, how the Hammer, why he has all these railroad spikes, and, like, what exactly happened to him, or the Jackal, and, like, all these great things, because it would explain the way that they're reacting to different people a whole lot better, as opposed to, oh, the Jackal's crazy and he just attacks anybody. No, he specifically, he's more prone to attacking women, because that was who he was when he was living. But this film, yeah, I wouldn't be upset if they gave us, Cabin in the Woods prequel to talk about, the director coming up with this experiment because, hey, we don't need to sacrifice people in caves. I'm not caves, in volcanoes anymore. Which Hadley and Sitterson make that reference to it and saying, hey, we used to just throw people into volcanoes, or remember when we used to do that? And he kind of jives back. He's like, how old do you think I am? To let him, to at least throw it out there that this is some shit that's been going on for a long, long time.
Yeah, I think if we got another movie, which, I mean, Joss's response is always, have you seen the end of this film? And then he just stares at people, which I think is fantastic.
Yeah.
But no, I think if we got one, I would want to just know about, like, the dynamics of these facilities. And,
right.
like, even like a war between them, like, oh, we're going to go fuck up Japan's shit so that they're not undefeated anymore. We got this. We'll handle it. We can take them out this year. Like something like that. I'd be totally into that. I think that'd be interesting. It would almost be like the Belko experiment, like on steroids.
Wouldn't it be weird if it turned out Fantastic Beasts was the prequel to this movie?
It might not be, but it's my new headcanon, so thank you.
Maybe I missed it, but is there this point in the film where they talk about, they talk about the other countries or regions that are having to do the same thing. Is it an issue of they all have to do it, or at least all have to perform it, but one has to be successful? Or is it an issue of it's just overkill? We're all going to do it. We all need to make sure that we finish this the right way, and it covers all bases. Because that wasn't clear to me. They got really pissed off when Japan didn't make it, and it's kind of like, oh well, ours is fucked up too. So something bad is going to happen.
Well, I mean, to me, it's overly obvious that one of them has to do it. But I'm with you.
Right.
I want to know if the first one who does it succeeds, then, like, do the others have to do it still? Do they still slaughter all these teenagers across all these countries?
Because the only bets that they seem to make is what monster was coming out. It wasn't, hey, who's going to be the final person? Or maybe that is just some other shit. Like if Japan had finished early, finished successfully, you have all this time with the time difference to go ahead and determine, okay, well, let's change our shit up a little bit in, I don't know. We'll now bet on who's going to make it out of this experiment.
And it was also interesting because they were talking about whatever the family's name is now. I don't remember, but the zombie redneck torture family, how their like kill rate or whatever it was like 100% versus some other monster. That would have been interesting to see if like they knew if they got the unicorn that was going to be a dud for them, and now they're waiting on Japan to finally pull through.
See, that'd be interesting, huh? Somebody should make a podcast where they just explore this for episodes upon episodes, and I'll listen to it. I'll be your only listener, but do it anyway.
Also, it would have been interesting to see because the movie's called Cabin in the Woods. So would the Japanese one be classroom in the school? Like, how were they choosing their locations to set this up? Kind of like a Saw movie where they're setting it up for the best kill rate, I guess.
Yeah. That's another great line.
Oh, about like how hard is it to kill 9-year-olds? I laughed, and I'll continue to laugh every time I hear that because it's just delivered so dryly. It's like, how fucking hard is it to kill 9-year-olds? Apparently, when it's Home Alone and in a few other films, it's really fucking hard. But I really want to know like what those kids did because they're in the classroom. They're all in the same room with the Japanese floaty monster Kiko, and they figure out how to deal with her. I mean, is this one of these things where, like with a lot of our folklore, with a lot of Western folklore, we know, the backstory or the fairy tale that goes along with it, or at least get some information, and it's kind of like, oh yeah, that's easy. It's Rumpelstiltskin. All I have to do is get him to say his name, or however that shit goes. Or the troll, I got to answer 3 questions and he'll go away. Do we have anything like that would really, or would we even know how to do it to make sure that it works?
The monster is based on a piece of Japanese folklore called Yurei. That's wrong, I'm sure. Which are evil spirits originating from people who have been murdered or who have committed suicide. They are not granted a peaceful afterlife or haunt people because of it. So it's kind of like a Japanese La Llorona, I think.
Okay.
But what a bad day to have her as a substitute teacher. She just walks in with that big ass TV and the strap on top, and you're like, well, looks like we're gonna have to say some weird chant to get her to turn into a frog.
What if she was the normal? What if she was the normal sub and she just got pissed off with the kids by pretending that answering the role the wrong way? Like, Smith, she's not here. What have you, Smith?
Good Lord. So, one thing that I find really interesting to sort of steer this in a totally different direction for a minute, they don't give a shit about Dana. When they think that everyone else is dead, they just start having this party in the office. And they don't care that Dana's getting her ass kicked by the zombie father dude. And they don't care if she makes it out of this. Like, they've completely given up on her. They don't give a shit at all because their part's done. And that really struck me because it's kind of like sports to me. Like when one team is up, I don't know, say 25-3 at halftime. And then you think, well, this is done. And you throw a party and you don't care about the rest, Like, I don't know. It seemed so cold and callous to me that they just they don't send something to save her now. They're not like, hey, you did it. You win. Come to our party.
No, remember, she was optional.
Yeah,
like she could die, she could survive, and fuck it, she got caught by Big Daddy Ruckus or what Buckner, Big Daddy Buckner, and I'm just gonna call him that from now. By Big Daddy Buckner, and it's kind of like, well, fuck it, you didn't make it.
But like, you would think somebody would be like interested in watching it, like, or like making more bets. Like 2 guys betting over if she lives or dies would have been interesting to me.
There was like the one security guard guy with the mustache who was kind of had out of everybody had like the conscience of like, oh, this is really happening. Like it was this, I don't know, like he got hired a month ago and he was not really told what his job had entailed or whatever. But he seemed to be the only one that had a conscience about it. And even then, that kind of went out the window at the end anyway.
And who the fuck thought, hey, you're new. You should be with the 2 most important people running this thing. Like, why is he with Hadley and Sitterson? He should be like getting coffee for somebody in the chem department. It's fucking strange.
It probably would have been his backstories. Maybe he was some badass special forces guy, and they paid him a shitload of money and said, "Keep your fucking mouth shut." But yeah, Brent, you're right. He was a confusing but reassuring character for me, because for him, seeming to have come from a world that dealt with brutality, at least the indication I was getting from him, or at least the way that he was handling himself, it seemed odd that he's kind of like, this is what you fucking guys are doing. Like you're doing this. And when Sitterson and Hadley like give him the rundown, they're like, well, you don't do shit. They have free will. All we have to do is get them in the cellar. They make the choices after that. All we got to do is make sure they get down there, and then we just watch. Which, it was a great way to kind of brush off any responsibility. You still set up everything for them to be a part of this, to be the sacrifices. But it's like, oh, well, we don't have anything to do with it. They just go down in the cellar. They make a choice. That choice is going to come visit them.
Why is it in the cellar? Why isn't it you walk into the cabin and the shit's sitting there? Guess how much easier our job just got?
Well, I guess it goes back to why not just throw them in the volcano? I guess whoever is watching wants a show, apparently. Versus it's weird. Like if you ask too many questions, then you're like, what you have more questions. But then it's also fun to just sit back and and just go for the ride. Where it's like, all we need is to get to the part where all the monsters are released. It's kind of like a Fast and Furious movie. Just get to the part where they're racing. You know what I'm saying?
Exactly.
But I like to think this movie's a little more sophisticated than that. But yeah, it's really interesting how they have to get these kids murdered. But then how is like 4 people's blood enough to satisfy the god's need for a year, whatever it is? It's just, if you ask too many questions, then it doesn't like negate the movie, but it's just you're left with more questions.
These are just the weird things I think about.
I don't know. I like the cellar thing, James. I mean, because it gives you that throwback to 80s, well, 70s and 80s slasher movies of where if we had been in one of the theaters with that multicultural, that diverse audience, that cellar door swings open and there's going to be somebody in that audience that says, "Don't you fucking go in the cellar." And you're just sitting there watching them like, okay, if any of us had been in that room, I would like to think we would have seen it swing open like, oh shit, the wind must have knocked it up, like the excuse they gave. I'm going to go over and close it because this house has been sitting vacant for a while. I mean, the one girl's concern is that there might be a spider in there. But if this place has been vacant and the cellar door pops open, close it back because there's probably nothing good in that cellar that you need to get your hands on. Literally, in this case, you don't need to get your hands on.
It would also be fun to, maybe it was on the DVD extras that I didn't watch, but it would just be fun to get like an Antiques Roadshow style, like, give me every object to see, because of course she reads from the book, Latin or whatever, but it was like, then you also had that egg thing that the Saw guy held.
Right.
There's so much like mythology that's not even addressed anymore in this movie. That's really interesting.
Well, And my question, I wrote this down, and I think I've seen it in a couple of memes, where it's like, why is it always Latin as summoning demons and shit? Like, is there not another language that they might? Because I'm pretty sure that the Buckners spoke English. Just going by their last name, I'm pretty sure they spoke English. I'm not sure that Latin would have been the thing that was going to trigger them. But it was cute that they used it, at least from the perspective of the guys who were orchestrating this, to make it seem like, oh, they're going to be reading from Latin. And those of us who love those horror movies, like, you idiots, you're not supposed to read from the book if it's in Latin. Bad shit happens. But I love how they throw all these jokes and cliches and stereotypes into this, just in the stuff that they didn't have to do. Like, they could have easily had her read, the part where the little girl, Patience Buckner, is talking about having, losing her arm or something. And then the fucking arm, they send the arm up first, and that really freaks people out or whatever. And then, of course, all the rest of the Buckners rise from the dead.
I actually watched a video that said what the translation of the Latin is. And I can't imagine her reading it this way. The translation is, pain outlives the flesh, pain raises the flesh, pain ignites the spirit. It doesn't have the same ring to it.
Oh, you mean in English?
Yeah.
But somewhere I still like to think there's some kind of great value zombies that you just resurrected because you did it in English and not Latin.
I'm going to be raising a lot of zombies in Phoenix soon.
Look,
anyway,
those zombies that you probably would have raised speaking English right now, reciting that chant, probably would show up to a store wearing a mask and practicing social distancing. So there's a level of intellect with those zombies that, a good amount of the public is not exercising right now.
It'd be the worst zombie movie ever. They rise and they're still wearing their masks, so now they can't eat you.
What do you guys think happened after the end when that hand comes up? Does that happen all over the world or just in that location? And then how does this play out? Do humans go extinct pretty quick, or now we have new overlords? What do you think happened?
I like to think of it because they said the ancient ones, and I like to think about the Godzilla rules as far, especially with the King of Monsters, the sequel King of Monsters, where it ends up being them taking over but fighting each other for dominance of the world, as opposed to they're going to go ahead and eradicate all. I don't think humanity would be able to coexist, but I think they would rise up all around the planet because everybody failed, and then they would either run their regions or fight each other for domination. But we wouldn't last too long while they're doing that.
I mean, I would think that the entire world had to be affected. My reason is, if the entire world is not affected, what are the odds for next time? Like, you failed. You didn't stop them in Japan, right? So if you don't get destroyed, why do you try as hard next year? You're like, meh, we'll probably still be here. We just can't be last. Like, we just have to get it done faster than everyone else and we'll be fine. So I think in that respect, it had to destroy the entire world. But if it didn't, then what I would like to see this giant hand guy come out, and now he puts all the people in little cages, and then he sets up other monsters in these situations, and they pick like Kevin, and Kevin comes and kills them.
Are you satisfied with that hand coming up at the end for the ending?
I love it. The reason that I like it is I find it very reminiscent of Dana slamming the red button that's very strategically placed to unleash all the monsters. Like, I think it's kind of the same. So I think that this monster is basically hitting the red button on humanity.
Oh, I never thought of it that way.
Let's go for that hard reset. I like it for
now I like that ending
even
better.
The setup prior. Yeah, he should have pushed down a tree or something. That would have been. I think he might, or it may. I don't know, it's male or female that came up. But no, even Marty, when Marty and Dana are in the middle of all the ancient ones statues, or at least their figures, they're having that dilemma as far as like, do you complete the ritual in order to save everyone? And Marty is sitting there like, nah, we've had our shot, which was an awesome way to look at a disaster film, disaster horror film, apocalyptic film. And you have this one guy who has a choice and it's like, no, I'm not going to sacrifice one person so everybody else can survive. And just that idea of, he understood that all this was going to do was going to keep continuing, and you're going to have to sacrifice innocent people anyway.
Yeah, would you sacrifice yourself, Don?
Well,
if you were Marty, are you going there?
Part of me was sat there and thought, like, there's no fucking way. Really? These things are going to come out of the ground, and I would just sit there like, oh, fuck, I was wrong.
Well, at the same time, you also just saw a murdering clown. You saw all these creatures, escape. On one hand, you'd have to think how much crazier can get, but also it's already gotten this crazy. Why wouldn't it get any more crazy?
Well, there's also this factor though. If all those monsters are now loose in the facility, if I save humanity, I also doom humanity because all these fucking things are going to be loose.
You're probably not making it out of there either way.
Right. And I guess Marty's issue was he didn't want to be the one that made that choice, which I can respect. But I also have problems with the labeling because he may have been labeled the fool, but he proved quickly. In fact, all of them did. None of them fit those descriptions. So you have, the Kurt was labeled the jock or the athlete or whatever the titles were for each of them. Mm-hmm. And it was funny because they make reference to that early on in the film with when Dana and Holden are talking about something and said, oh, he called me Brainiac, or Marty says he called you Brainiac, but he's on an academic or full academic scholarship. Mm-hmm. Not student athlete scholarship, an academic scholarship. So he's cast in more ways than one as the athlete, as the dumb jock, but he's not. In fact, that's how we first meet him. And you mentioned that we first see him with the Letterman's jacket and throwing the football out the window. And you're like, oh, here's the stupid jock. Jules is pre-med. So she's not the dumb whore. In fact, she doesn't get horny except for the fact that they dose them with all this shit. To the point where she's making out with a stuffed and mounted wolf on the wall. And
it was a moose, by the way.
I love
Have you ever even seen a moose?
And then Dana, when she's making out with Holden on the couch, she says, oh, it's not really my first time.
Mm-hmm.
And so all these ways that they've been cast, so it almost seems like you could have thrown anybody in there and claimed that they were being the sacrifice. So I was just hoping that Sigourney Weaver's character that was going to get tossed in and used as a sacrifice. Because in all honesty, you could argue that she was a fool for, taking innocent people into this hodgepodge of chaos in order to satisfy these demons or these ancient ones, these gods or whatever.
And you just went from Halloween H2O was solid ending, and you turned it into Halloween Resurrection, how you can undo all that. And I would still be like, I would still watch it, but I'd be like, I don't buy this for a second. But also, we were talking about, in that sacrificial room where they have to have the jock and the fool. That you don't even get that in the Japanese classroom. It's all just little girls,
right?
So. I don't. Then again, if you think too much of it, then it's. But it's also like, you just need to get to the monsters. That's all you need,
Right.
Just a random fact drop here, as long as we're talking about people who are not what they appear in this film. Like each character, of course, doesn't really fit the description, and Sigourney Weaver says we work with what we have, right?
Mm-hmm.
Well, so there's a scene early on where they're all jumping into the lake or getting thrown into the lake, depending on who you are. And the only one that doesn't go in the lake is Marty. And I was watching a behind the scenes thing, and apparently Marty, in real life, the actor is just fucking ripped. And they thought that he looked more muscular than the other two guys. More muscular than Thor here, people. And so that's why they kept him covered up and didn't throw him in the lake. And I was just like, that's fucking phenomenal.
That's the same reason I don't go swimming, because I don't want to embarrass all the other men with my body.
Goddamn right.
All right. I had to look up the Japanese one because there's the British, Argentinian, Swedish, Japanese, and American. Those are all the rituals that are involved here. The Japanese, they have to be children, or it doesn't say whether it's gender or not, but have to be between 9 and 14.
Oh.
So it's not an issue of holding on to those five archetypes. For the Japanese, they have to be children. Adults can't intervene, so it has to just be the kids. The Swedish, it involves a volcano. The Argentinian. You know what? I'm thinking with the other ones, they aren't choosing a bunch of different monsters. I think the Americans are choosing the monsters to have more variety.
Fucking Americans. We're never satisfied with what we have.
See, that's why this movie would play so well for the other sequels, just with, the different situations you can get into. And maybe you would start, after like one or two sequels, you'd start treading the same ground again. But it would just be interesting to see. Give me the Argentinian version. I want to see that and how they do that. Because it's like those John Wick movies. Have you guys seen those?
Yeah.
Yes.
Where he's paying with these coins, and then in the middle of this action movie, you're like, "What's that? Like, why are you guys all paying with the same coins?" It's like, I want to know more about that backstory type thing.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sitting here and I'm like, well, if the rules are different for the Japanese, why isn't their elder god pissed off? Why isn't he attacking people? Like, why is he okay with, oh, well, the other elder god over there in America got some satisfaction, so I guess we'll all just hang out here. It's kind of weird.
I imagine them at the center of the earth, like on this massive sectional couch, all chilling down there from the different regions. And it's like, God damn it, we've gone for thousands of years. One of you needs to go up there and remind them to scare them a little bit. Then come the fuck back down here.
Just bust some kneecaps. I watch enough mafia movies to know that if this is the type of guy that says, I got to make a stop. That whenever somebody in a mafia movie says, I got to make a stop, it's never good for the person he's going to see.
Nope, never. Maybe all the elder gods are lazy and they're like, you go. No, you go. All right, fine. I'll go.
I got the last one.
I destroyed the dinosaurs. It's your turn.
Like, damn it, I got all those people at Atlantis. That's why the mermen are all fucked up now.
Jesus.
There's like certain jokes in this movie, especially a lot of them are facilitated with the two controller guys. I don't remember their names, but the scene where they're dancing to the music in the cabin and it cuts to them dancing in the control room. They said nothing, but it just made me laugh out loud. That type of stuff. I don't know. I just really I can appreciate a horror movie that's either really scary, creative, and funny on top of that.
Most definitely.
All right, so we're nearing the end of this episode. So I want to talk to you guys about what I think is one of the key themes in this film and get your input on it. So we talked about like pleasing the gods and in turn probably the audience. I want to look at this through a larger scope and talk about the idea of what humans do for the illusion of safety. So like throughout this whole thing, we're told that people in the game have to choose it. They have to choose to continue to the cabin They have to choose to ignore the Harbinger. They have to choose which relic will conjure the beast that they're going to face so that they get sacrificed. We reach the end. Marty and Dana still get to decide, right? So, what I'm thinking with this is that this entire thing is the illusion of safety. Everyone in this office thought they were safe. You know, they build this whole project for the illusion of safety, and then they get fucked over by these monsters. So what I want to know from you guys is, what do you think in this respect? How does this reflect the links that Americans and humans in general are willing to go to for the illusion of safety?
Ooh. Brent, I'll let you go first on that one because I got some special thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's definitely an interesting thing that they've, it's a reflection of society of that, the guys that have stockpiled arms, and it's everybody's safety. But then, I'm kind of quoting a meme that I saw, but again, they won't wear a mask for other people's safety. It's just like they'll have a stockpile of guns for their safety, but again, they won't take the simple step of wearing a mask in a pandemic. It's like it's like that thing where like sacrificing the needs of few for the many, but it's also still kind of a shitty thing because these kids have to die for no reason because they kind of fit an archetype which they really didn't in the first place. Yeah, I don't know. It's just and even at the end they weren't safe. It just was the illusion of safety, and then they even turned it into a party with betting, and then it still fell through. Yeah, I don't know. It's just a bizarre concept to even introduce into a movie, but I think it's very reflective of society today.
Well, and you mentioned the masks and how we're not willing to do this simple thing to save others, and that's kind of how I feel about like, and this is my personal opinion. Feel free to eat me alive online for it, but like gun safety and stuff, like when people aren't willing to have background checks, or they're not willing to register every gun that they have, or we're not willing to fund mental health. Like it goes back to that same thing to me. It's always, I want the illusion of safety for me. I don't give a shit about actual safety for anyone else. And I think that your masks fall into that. Definitely.
Well, even the concept of, I don't know what the statistic is, but it's, a lot of people die in their homes from their own guns or their parents' guns. It's a kid that finds it. Right. I mean, that's not safety. That never would have happened if you had the gun. And I'm not saying all guns are bad. I'm not saying that, but I'm also saying with a car, you got to have a license to use it. It's not just like you're given a car. At least have a little bit of common sense with it,
Yeah, no, definitely. I'm not even like, I'm a pretty liberal person. Like, I grew up in Nebraska. We view guns very, very different than we view them here in Phoenix.
You guys have a 2-gun minimum, right? And
pretty much, yeah. I had to have friends with me at all times so that they would have guns to make up my part. But so it comes to that personal responsibility. You're talking about cars. We have to take classes. We have to learn to drive. We have to have insurance to ensure that when an accident happens, we can help out. And I feel like if guns had that sort of stuff, more people would be accepting of them instead of completely against it. But when those are the only two options we get, that kind of falls off. Right. Anyway, Don, what do you think about the illusion of safety and how this movie reflects it all?
Well, there's a great phrase or term that's been popularized within the last 20 years called security theater. And it's all about, and you can really say it's the same thing with this film, but it's all about the different security measures that people take in order to feel secure without doing anything. So, or at least there's nothing that's really going to help them become more secure, or there comes something else that they tie into it. And one of my favorite examples prior to the one I'm going to bring up was from an episode of The Simpsons where there was a bear that was loose in town. And, they trapped the bear, and then the town then invoked a bear tax. So they had like a stealth bomber. They had like all the satellite, they had cameras, they had all this shit running around. And so Lisa says, this is kind of ridiculous that we're spending all this money on this bear tax. And then Homer says something to the effect of, Well, it's working because do you see any bears? And it's kind of the same way. And this is nothing against people at the TSA or the TS motherfucking A.
Nice.
Nothing against the TSA as far as the employees, but the presence, at least the false sense of security that's there. Because I don't want any way, shape, or form this to be seen as a suggestion that anybody takes from this podcast, but the water. And I was in the Army when, they made that restriction about you can't carry more than 3 ounces of liquid onto the plane or whatever. Mm-hmm. But one of the most ridiculous things is to see it from the American side and then travel abroad and how it gets. When you go to an American airport, you can go all the way up, past the ticket gate and ticket agent and check your bags and do all that shit, then go into security to where a lot of people are congregated. And James and I talked about this before, where all these people are congregated, and then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, you got to dump that water. Now, if I were one of these people who had a liquid bomb, that's the perfect place to put one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because, it's all about that illusion of, hey, you plug your shoes, you might have some, bomb in your shoes. I had a pair of those Nike Plus shoes a while back, the ones that had like the microchip in them, and you could hook them up to your, an app on your phone, and all this other shit.
You make so much more money than I do.
No, I hit the sales, man. That's the thing. Hit those clearance sales. But yeah, you put the little chip in the shoe, and it tells you like how many steps you've taken. This is like 10 years ago. My shoes are going through the security thing, the X-ray. They stopped me a minute while they're trying to determine what's in my shoe, and I'm telling them like, it's the Nike shoes. It's a little pedometer thing in the bottom of it. So they run it through. They test it for bomb shit and like all this other stuff. And this one older guy, the TSA is like, those shoes are way too advanced, man. It's like, I'm the PF Flyer generation. And I just looked at him like, yeah, thanks for giving my shoes back, because this did nothing. And there are often times when you could simply go through and not even really have to go through security and be checked out. That it's more about making you feel safe, making you feel as though you're going to be okay. There's not going to be a problem with your flight. When, probably the biggest issue is going to be the people that you're flying with. I mean, we've all seen those videos of sometimes the flight attendants or flight crew or just the passengers that are just complete assholes and dangerous to everybody else. Meanwhile, they don't get screened for personalities.
Or you can have a trash can full of water bombs, but then as soon as you get past that, then you can have all the alcohol you want, and you could pretty much piss your chair, and then they won't say anything until you're like disruptive.
Right?
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah, it's really weird. But do you think the belief that you are safe, whether it's true or not, is also beneficial? Because I'm sure with, the current time right now with the coronavirus, they probably didn't say much because they didn't want to panic people. Where do you think that line is drawn of creating panic versus having false security?
Well, I think the government. Oh, sorry. I think with the government in this sense, with like the TSA, it's a damned if you do, damned if you don't situation. So if they didn't do anything, after 9/11, or if they didn't do anything after the shoe bomber or the water bomb, the liquid bomb threat or anything like that, it would look as though, well, you're just waiting for something, you're not acting. But I think it's more an issue for the public's concern to understand, hey, at least the government is doing something. At least there's this way to provide, at least with some sense of security for the passengers or anybody who's going to be in those airports working or whatever else is going on. It's just something I guess the world has changed a lot in the past 20 years. Whereas before the biggest, issue you had with flying was, getting somebody to take you to the airport.
I'll throw in one of my stories just to answer what I feel about what you just said, Brent. Basically, I was flying to Philadelphia last year, and I don't know why, but I decided I was taking cashews with me. And did I think, hey, I should pour these into a plastic bag? Fuck no. I thought, hey, I'll throw this metal container into my laptop case. This will be fine. So I have, it's a medium size or a small size. It's not like the tall one, right? Mm-hmm. And so it's like the size of like an Alexa or some shit. Anyway, so I throw it into my bag. I don't take into account that my Kindle charger's in there, my laptop cord's in there, my whatever cords I have, my phone, whatever. So this thing goes through X-ray. And they see this little fucking cylinder surrounded by wires. Now, at this point, it's good that I'm a white male because shit broke loose. All of a sudden, I had like 4 guys on me, and they're like pulling me off to the side and literally look like they're going to beat the shit out of me. And I'm a little panicked, but at the same time, I don't have any fucking clue what's going on because I'm not thinking, oh, hey, my cashews are in there, right? Mm-hmm. My point with all this is that illusion of security would have been instantly debunked back in the day when you opened shit and looked inside. But since we need this illusion of security and everything's going through X-rays, it looks like James brought a fucking bomb with him. So I get it through. One of the guys leaves and he comes back with a plastic bag and he's like, "Put your nuts in here."
Were you still confused at that point?
It took me everything not to respond. I was literally having a conversation in my head like, do you want to get shot over a joke? But he didn't look like he had a sense of humor, so I'm glad I didn't go for it. But I really do think that illusion of security also brings a heightened sense that then adds to panic. And I think that's kind of where you were going with that. What do you guys think of that? Do you have any more examples of that, or?
Well, you could argue that, especially what's been going on the past 3 years in the media, it's been going on for longer, but, black people getting, having police brutality where you can watch a video of a cop choke out a guy for selling loose cigarettes. And that's all he was doing. He was choking the guy out. But then if you turn around, those are also the guys that are supposed to help us, the cops. And I think if you ask most citizens now, if you're like, hey, would you rather have the cops not have the body cam or the body cam? They'd probably say body cam because you don't know. I mean, those are the guys that are supposed to protect us, but also they're trying to keep their jobs too. And I'm not saying all cops are bad, but I'm saying all it takes is one for them to do so, to choke you out for doing nothing,
Yeah. And I mean, I always go back to the same thing I say to responsible gun owners. Then stand up to the bad ones. And I say that to cops as well. I'm like, if you don't want us to think all cops are shit, stand up to the bad ones. Stop taking their side just because of the blue line. When gun owners stand up to shitty gun owners, and when cops stand up to shitty cops and whatever else, things will start changing. But until those things happen, bad cops aren't going to listen to normal people like me. And gun owners who are over the edge and crazy and want to go on shooting sprees definitely aren't going to listen to a liberal ass fuck like me. So we need that. We need the good guys to actually step up instead of just telling us how good they are.
Well, it's all relative. Back to Cabin in the Woods, those control people to somebody that's not in that reality show were like, oh, those are the good guys because they're doing a bad thing, but they're also protecting the world. But then if you turn it around, the people that are in the reality show are like, what? Fuck you. These, these are the bad guys.
Definitely. Don, do you have anything you want to add?
Nothing that can be aired.
Well, all right then. Brent, I know you had a fun question you wanted to end this with, so hit me with it.
Is there a movie that you guys, if this was Netflix, is there another movie that you guys would recommend that people would also like?
In the same vein as this film, or just in general?
In the same vein, yeah.
Boy,
I think. Oh man, well this hits like three, 4 different parts of horror. So I would say one would be that comes to mind is Hush. Where you've got that person that's stuck in the house, and there are a couple of the cliches that get used, but it's great to see how the character or the characters work so well together, whether it's the killer or it's the potential victim in this pitched battle that ensues to one, survive, or two, get that person. But then, of course, we mentioned a couple of times before, Belko experiment very close with this one as far as there's a lot more going on, and you learn more about how large this world is, or at least all the people that are involved in whatever's taking place as the movie progresses.
For me, I'm going to go Ready or Not. I know I've already brought this film up today, but Ready or Not is such a great mix of humor and horror. It's got truly scary shit in it. It has like this scene that I've seen the movie probably 3 or 4 times, and I still like cringe when this one injury happens.
Oh, that's my favorite.
But like just the absolute use of humor again with the horror. Ready or Not, I think 100%. If you like Cabin in the Woods, you'd like Ready or Not.
What about you, Brent?
I mean, I was going to say, are there any other ones that, like the quintessential ones? And obviously, I think you have to say the Evil Dead franchise. You'd pull up and you see that cabin.
Right.
Yes.
And then I mentioned 13 Ghosts. For literally, if you just like pivoted a little bit, then you see 13 Ghosts with, creatures being released from, cages or whatever. But also as far as humor goes, maybe like Shaun of the Dead, I think, just
right.
for humor wise, that's also just one of my favorite horror movies in general anyway. But that, or like It Chapter 2, why I don't think is like the best horror movie ever. It's so funny, like almost it's funnier than it is scary to me, especially with the Bill Hader character. As far as those humor aspects goes, this movie could translate well to Cabin in the Woods. We're talking about that goddamn movie, but It Chapter 2 and Shaun of the Dead.
We've gone over every aspect of this, in my opinion, and I really like that you asked about the Netflix analogy of what else would you recommend with this. We should start doing that more on this show. We've never done that before, and I think that's a really cool thing to do.
Matter.
And Shudder, yes, we love Shudder.
Shout out to Shudder. Use the promo code. They're not a sponsor for 20% off at checkout.
You know who else isn't a sponsor, Don? Popeyes, bastards. So we had an ongoing thing for several weeks where I just kept trying to get Popeyes to be our sponsor. Anyway,
that's fine until they released that sandwich,
and then it caused chaos. And look where the world is now. So
what the ancients didn't want was that sandwich released, and now we're here.
That's where it all began. Tell your friends. So,
I would say anybody that's listening to this podcast that could, because I shared it. I'm looking through your library of other episodes, and you have some really good topics like Train to Busan and Hereditary, which is one of my favorites as well. So if you liked me on this show, you should go listen to other episodes that I'm not on.
Oh, thank you. We're actually doing Shaun of the Dead in a few weeks as well. So I thought it was a nice little throw in there, and I didn't even pay you for that, much less the 13 Ghost conversation earlier. So.
Well, I'm trying to get you guys to be a sponsor of me. So
sweet. All right, man. Why don't you tell everybody once again where they can find you and check out your videos, and if you have any live shows coming up. I don't know what's going on with that right now, but just tell them everything about yourself.
BrentComedy.com is the link to all the websites. I try to do videos whenever something is relevant. A lot of that is political, social commentary. So if that's not your thing, I get it, because sometimes it's not mine as well. I also do a podcast called The Field Trip with Brent Terhune, where I've covered just recently the Halloween franchise, the Friday the 13th franchise. Also, there's some other episodes like parody religions. I'm sure you guys have heard of the Church of the Flying Spaghetti Monster.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Or the Church of Google, or the Pink Unicorn Church, I think is what it was called. or the Church of the Latter-day Dude from The Big Lebowski.
I almost became a minister for that church.
I believe I'm a minister. I think one of the walls in my toy room or whatever I call this room, I want to just have a wall of certifications that aren't real.
That's a great idea.
So BrentComedy.com is the podcast, or that's my podcast, is the field trip, links to that. Also, I just wanted to ask a general question. Do you guys collect any kind of horror merch, and what is your prized possession?
Oh my gosh, James, you got this one. Because I know what you're going to say.
I'm literally looking at it right now. So, okay, so I have this strange obsession with Darth Maul. Okay. And as much as I'm not a fan of the prequels of Star Wars, Darth Maul is like to me, Darth Vader is great, but Darth Maul had more potential. Like, I want to know his whole story. I want to know everything about him. And so then Jason Voorhees is my favorite slasher of all time, right? So I have a Jason Voorhees mask painted with Darth Maul's paints. And I got it autographed by Ray Park and Kane Hodder. And it's my favorite thing. It's literally in front of me as I'm speaking right now. So
that's the kind of horror merch I love, because it's not, you can't buy that anywhere, and it's like a mashup of your two favorite things.
Yeah. And outside of that, I collect a lot of random shit. I do a lot of cons. I did 15 conventions last year, and I get to meet a lot of people like Tony Todd or whoever else and hang out with them a bit. So I have like weird shit that doesn't mean anything to anyone else. Like, I have a marker that Tony Todd used, but I know Tony Todd used it, you know? Things like that. So what about you, Don? What do you collect?
Well, it's anything voodoo.
That's creepy. No, I'm just kidding.
I was going to say, like, the books. I've got a few dolls in the house. Some creepy photos. And I haven't been able to go visit Marie Laveau's grave yet, but I don't know when that'll be, because now you actually need a guided tour to go into that cemetery, and I'm not sure exactly when they will. I mean, obviously, because everything is going on, as far as when they will reopen, and I would be able to go there. Plus, I plan on taking a trip to Haiti sometime in the near future to do some research on a project I told you about that involves one of your deepest fears.
Mermaids.
My wife would be interested in, because she's like big into voodoo and tarot card reading. I don't think those are the same thing, by the way, but that realm of that horror genre, that kind of stuff, she's really interested in.
That's cool.
Not me. I think it's dumb. I'm just joking, but no. So have you made like voodoo dolls?
No. I haven't done any of that stuff. The creepiest conversation I had with my dad was, I made some comment about some movie where they did voodoo or whatever, and my dad's like, "That's not how it's done." And I looked at him like, "What the fuck are you talking about?" And he's like, "Your grandmother used to, my grandmother, your great grandmother used to do voodoo, and that's not how it's done." I'm like, what the fuck are you telling me? He's like, "Yeah, it's pretty simple. Sometimes you do this, and you might get some dirt from the graveyard. There's some really dark stuff that gets into that, which those of you who are listening, if you're ever in the state of Louisiana, especially in the state of Louisiana, this is for the fellas there. This might save your life. Don't eat anything red from a woman that you've just gotten to know."
Oh, you had to go there.
What happens?
Well, she uses a special potion to make you fall in love with her.
Oh, yeah, that happened to me. That's what happened.
She puts something in your food, and apparently it makes you fall in love with them, and you become their love slave. At least that's one of the theories.
I actually, at the time of this recording, next week I was supposed to go on my honeymoon to New Orleans, but this coronavirus threw a wrench into that. But yeah, we're big fans of that type of stuff, especially my wife. But yeah, can I talk about my merch?
Yes, please do.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, my favorite horror stuff. This one is new, but it's it's a full poster, but it's just the Halloween 2018 black and white McFarlane poster. I think it's like the steelbook cover of the DVD, but I just was at FYE and I saw they had them. And they were like, yeah, nobody pre-ordered the DVD, so we just got a whole bunch of these posters. I'm like, can I have one? And they're like, yeah. So it's just a really cool piece of art with the aged Michael Myers mask that I really like. And then the other thing, you guys may have seen this guy at cons, but I believe his company's called Scream Prints, but they're mashups of like, it'll be like the Peanuts kid sitting around a campfire, but then there's Jason peeking out behind that. So I have probably like 20 of those different versions of pictures. Like, I don't know. It's directly behind me, so I'm trying to talk into my mic and look at them at the same time. But like Scooby-Doo and Michael Myers and that kind of thing. So that's like not a, FYE Target merch, but it's fun to like support an artist, especially those mashup type things with your Jason and your Darth Maul mask.
Awesome. All right, man. So I just want to thank you one more time for coming on the show. This has been a lot of fun. I've been wanting to rewatch Cabin in the Woods forever, and this gave me a reason to just kick it up my list. So I had a blast, man. Thank you for being here.
Well, thanks for having me, guys. It's good to talk to you, and it's weird to say meet you guys, but digitally. But it's good hanging out with you guys. Thanks for having me on.
Absolutely, and you're welcome back anytime.
I'm glad you responded.
I'm really regretting it now, guys. No, I'm just joking.
I think you regret it now. Wait until I tag you 92 times next week.
That's all right. You'll probably edit to make me say weird things anyway. So.
Oh no, I only do that to Don. I make everyone else look good.
That sounds about right.
Yeah.
All right. So until next time, as always, I am James Sabata.
And I am Don Guillory.
And we'll see you next week here on the Necronama.com.